好，喺聖經裏面咧有好多個用 B 字嘅開始嘅 ideas 啦嚇，咁咧今日想同大家去分享咧，其實可能比較難少少嘅嚇。咁咧就係其實好多時咧，我哋喺人生嘅裏面，你一路成長又好，你甚至做咗大人都好，其實有時人哋會同你 say no 噶。你中唔中意人哋同你 say no 噶？唔得，唔可以，唔準搞，唔準掂，冇你份，唔係嗰啲呢，即係你聽到嘅時候，你覺得點㗎？又 no， 點解成日都 no 嘅呢？其實好多時呢，我哋唔係好中意聽到 no 㗎，我哋都係好想，我哋想做乜就做乜㗎。記得呢，試過呢，喺機場啊。即係我希望你哋未試過啦嚇，即係飛機要 cancel， 要 delay， 你次次行埋喺 counter 咧，佢都話 no， 冇你份啊！你班機 no， 你今日冇得飛啊！你要過咗48小時先有得飛嘅時候，不過其實你成個嘅計劃，成個嘅或者嗰個好辛苦啊，好無奈啊 ，no， 我哋好唔中意一啲嘅我哋話嗰啲叫 restrictions， 或者俾人去 reject 你。OK？ 喺而家咧，我哋嘅省啦，其實好多時有啲弟兄姊妹咧就冇得出街食嘢啦，除非去 food court 嘅啫。OK？ 咁就係咧，其實你有冇試過你行入去嘅時候咧，人哋真係差唔多撈你，叫你出翻嚟㗎？嗱，我試過慢少少咧，其實咧唔係好嘟到部機出嚟嘅時候咧，咁其實人哋都會好似喂你走啦，如果你冇嘅話嚇。咁有冇試過去一間嘅餐室，其實佢冇 check 你證㗎？冇啊 ，OK， 我試過有一間咧，佢係太忙啊，放緊 lunch 咧係冇 check 證嘅。Okay？即係咧，其實係如果你即係平常咧，你係可以入去食飯，但係而家如果你萬一冇帶手機又好，你個 Apps 開唔到又好，你個手機冇電又好，或者你其實真係冇打針又好，你有啲嘢唔能夠去做。No， 你嗰個嘅自由，你本來享有嘅權利係被人去停咗，去 reject 咗。有時咧，我哋好唔開心。但係其實你又睇翻喺人生嘅裏面，我哋都知道有啲嘢係真係要 no 嘅。我哋可能教小朋友由細開始喺廚房唔好玩，係咪啊？有冇人教小朋友喂喺廚房玩多啲啊？即係正常都唔會嘅 ，OK？ 玩水都唔會啦嚇，即係玩濕咗個廚房你都危險啊！或者廚房咧，其實好多時我哋覺得係應該係成人先至可以喺裡面嘅。又或者到小朋友大啦，開始去到 high school， 可能有 cooking class， 有好多嘢或者去 lab， 有好多嘅 safety 係教咗先，一定有啲嘅 guideline， 有啲嘅 restrictions， 有啲嘅保護。其實我哋都知道喺生活嘅裏面係一定有一啲嘅界線，係有一啲嘅 line 係一定要 draw。係有啲嘅地方真係危險嘅時候，你唔可以亂咁入，你一定要做足嗰個準備嘅措施，你先能夠入去。或者某個程度上，當你明白咗啦，你明白咗點解唔可以嘅時候，其實你調翻轉頭，可能你話啊，我終於明啦。可能你調翻轉頭唔係猛整，你係會thank you。原來嗰個係危險嘅。原來我真係要做好準備先至行入嗰個位，又或者其實我唔會準備好嘅時候，我就唔應該行入嗰個位。喺聖經嘅裏面，其實都有咁嘅教導。喺利未記第10章，其實我哋好熟悉嘅一個故事。亞倫咧有兩個仔，佢哋咧其實就唔係太生性 ，OK？ 咁其實咧佢哋就會聖經話其實佢哋亂咁獻祭咧，其實簡單啲講，就係佢哋英文咧就係好 strange 啊！佢哋獻嘅祭係一個 strange 嘅祭 ，OK？ 奇怪、奇異、唔 make sense、唔正常，即係佢哋搞咗一啲好另類嘅嘢 去獻祭俾上帝。而聖經就話咧，上帝就砰咁佢哋就瓜咗咯喎。OK， 即係呢個畫面咧，通常我哋唔想睇 OK。但係咧好簡單，一個兩節經文嘅記載就死咗兩個人。但係其實所以利未記唔係好想去勾畫呢個畫面出嚟，但係佢又要記載呢件嘅事情。佢好想講俾我哋聽咩事呢？唔係亞倫兩個仔死咗咁簡單啊，而係跟住摩西對亞倫話：耶和華係咁樣吩咐，耶和華講返，我喺親近我嘅人當中要顯為聖，喺全體百姓面前我要得着榮耀。喂，就咁簡單啫喎，幾句嘅説話。摩西就問上帝：喂，其實點解擊殺佢哋呢？其實就係咁簡單。上帝嘅答案就係話：我要喺親近我嘅人當中被顯為聖，全個百姓都要見到我得着榮耀。如果簡單，亞倫聽見呢個回應嘅話，佢就知道佢默默無言。就算佢嘅孩子死咗，佢知道係佢嘅兩個仔做咗 something wrong， 佢得罪咗上帝。而喺利未記嘅裏面有一段好重要嘅經文，就話我係耶和華你哋嘅上帝，你哋要使自己分別為聖，要成為聖，因為我是神聖的。你們不可因地上爬行嘅群聚動物使自己不潔淨。OK， 呢句咧可以跳走嘅。OK， 我是把你們從埃及地領出來的耶和華，要作你們的上帝，你們要成為聖，因為我是神聖的。上帝咧一路講，其實就係話：喂，你哋啊，你哋要記住一樣好緊要嘅嘢，我係神聖啊！你哋要尊我為聖，你哋唔可以隨隨便便嘅去親近我。利未記嘅設立，又或者利未記記載咗好多嘅事情咧，其實我哋唔係好想讀，又或者好多時出完埃及就 get stuck 喺利未記，跟住就放棄咗你去睇成卷聖經嗰個嘅心志。其實裡面有一啲好重要嘅 point， 就係話俾我哋知道，上帝其實係一個心意。上帝話我係神聖嘅，而我想你哋都係好似我一樣。你哋去親近我嘅時候，我希望你哋去好好嘅準備你自己。你哋要使你哋自己分別為聖。好似頭先嘅詩歌講，其實係你哋要去自己保守你嘅心。係你哋要自己去 make 嗰個嘅 effort， 唔係求求其其行埋嚟，好似奉旨一樣，上帝要接納你。其實唔係啊，其實利未記嘅教導話俾你我知道，神人係有一個嘅分別，係有一個 boundary 啊，係一條好緊要嘅一條線，一個嘅 boundary 去分開咗上帝同人。呢一條界線，你唔可以隨便去玩去搞。神人係有一個分別，又或者甚至喺新約聖經嘅裏面都好簡單講咗一句：神是輕慢不得的。即係你同我去敬拜、去親近上帝嘅時候，我哋唔可以隨便㗎，我哋唔可以輕佻，我哋唔可以話：我係咁㗎啦。其實一定有一個嘅扭轉，有一個嘅改變。我哋一定要知道上帝嘅心意。我今日喺咩嘅境況，而我學習去親近佢。我哋一定要 respect 嗰個嘅 boundary。而嗰個 boundary 某個程度上，其實係你可以想像係嗰啲喺馬路上嗰條黃色嘅線。你行錯咗對面嘅時候，其實對你嚟講係一個嘅危險，又或者可能喺 highway 邊嗰啲嘅欄杆，你衝咗出去，其實係你嘅危險。呢個 boundary 其實係要去保護你。喺聖經嘅裏面，利未記其實記載咗好多嘅 潔淨啊、不潔淨啊、pure 唔 pure 嗰啲嘅 guidelines，OK？可能咧有啲咧你唔係好明白㗎，或者你睇嚟睇去，甚至有任何嘅解經書你睇晒之後，其實你都覺得咦有啲嘢真係唔係好 make sense 嘅 ，OK？ 又或者可能你好慶幸咧喺新約嘅裏面咧，我哋有啲嘢唔需要被呢啲嘅事情去綁住 ，OK？ 但喺聖經嘅裏面喺舊約，其實實實在在有好多嘅 rules and regulations 係要嚟成為一個嘅 boundary， 俾我哋知道上帝嘅心意係咁樣。每一個跟隨佢嘅人，屬於佢嘅子民，其實就要去學做嗰啲嘅事情，以至我哋唔會亂咁 cross 咗嗰個嘅 boundary， 得罪咗上帝而唔知道，好似亞倫嗰兩個仔一樣。又或者其實可能你諗翻你未信主之前，可能咧你對信仰都有一啲嘅反感㗎，有一啲嘢咧你唔明白㗎，可能甚至你睇十誡咧，你都覺得咦有啲嘢真係唔係 make sense 嘅，係嘛？點解唔可以殺人啫？其實呢句咧大家都會尊重嘅。點解唔可以偷嘢？即係我咧，即係嗰陣咧試過，即係有人問點解唔可以偷嘢嘅？哇！即係呢啲咩朋友嚟啊？真係即係其實原來係有時點解唔可以貪人哋啲嘢？貪都唔得。其實我哋到底要問上帝嘅心意，有呢啲嘅 guidelines， 有一啲嘅線畫咗喺我哋嘅人生，有一啲嘅 boundary 去保護我哋啊。其實係個 purpose 先講咗啦。其實好清晰，頭先嘅經文講咗，因為上帝係神聖，所以你要親近佢嘅時候，你唔可以繼續污糟邋遢咁樣去親近佢，而你一定要去透過一啲嘅禮儀。喺利未記裏面有好多嘅禮儀，好多嘅祭，好多嘅節期，去幫助我哋去做一啲嘅 cleansing 啊。OK， 今日咧可能我哋做咩 cleansing 啊？做面嗰啲啦或者有啲弟兄姊妹就新潮啲，就去做一啲揾啲專做嘅即係腸胃嘅 cleansing 都有啊而家。即係我覺得有少少核突嘅 ，OK。咁但係咧就係、哇，原來咁樣可以 cleanse 你個 body 嗰啲嘅毒啊、排毒啊、清毒啊，或者排咗你個面部啊、皮膚嗰啲嘅污糟。上帝都係話，其實希望你哋記得喺你人生嘅裏面，你有啲嘅事情你遇上係你刻意又好，唔刻意又好。無奈嘅去遇上掂到一啲屍體，其實你都要去準備好好，佢有一啲嘅 cleansing， 以致你能夠去親近我。所以利未記裏面，上帝畫咗好多嘅 boundary， 好多嘅 guidelines。你哋係咁樣去親近我，去學習跟隨我。跟住咧有一個嘅 video 俾大家睇嘅 ，OK？ 咁你係希望咧透過呢個 video 咧嘗試俾我哋容易啲去明白 ，OK？ 咁咧但係其實都唔容易明白嘅 ，OK？ 但係呢個 video 咧好短好精簡，係其中一個好 common 去解讀利未記嘅一個嘅 videos 咁大家可以睇完再睇再翻睇嘅 ，OK？ 咁其實喺YouTube 就有噶啦咁。
The Book of Leviticus.
咁咧整咗個中文字幕俾大家先。
Leviticus, we know you've been avoiding it because it's weird. So let's fix that. Now remember, the story of the Bible began with humans in God's presence, but they were banished because of their rebellion. However, God wants to be in relationship with us, so he chooses one family that he will use to restore the world back into his presence.
And so God's presence comes to dwell in a tent right in the middle of Israel.
And that's great.
But it creates a problem. because it's so intense that Moses can't go in, and other priests who enter inappropriately, they die.
Well, wait, if God's presence is good, how is it all of a sudden dangerous for people?
So think of it this way. God's presence is like the sun. It's pure power and goodness. And when something mortal and corruptible gets close to such pure power, it's destroyed. And so the word holiness is used in Leviticus to describe God's pure and powerful presence, which, like the sun, is both good and dangerous. So the point of Leviticus is to show how corrupt Israelites can live near God's goodness without being destroyed. Now, in the book, there are 3 ways for how this is all going to work out, and these are going to seem strange to you, but just hang in there with us.
The first one is rituals. The second is this idea of the priesthood. And the third is a bunch of purity laws.
Now, the book is broken up into 7 sections, and each solution is explored in 2 sections of the book. The rituals are here, the priests are here, and the purity laws go here.
Now, the first solution, rituals, involves a lot of animal sacrifices. And so Leviticus begins with detailed instructions for how to make these sacrifices. Some are ways of saying thank you to God, and others are simply ways of saying, I'm sorry.
And here at the end of the book, there are some more rituals. These are about observing sacred days and festivals. They're all celebrations that retell some part of the story of how God rescued Israel and set them apart from the nations.
The second solution to the holiness problem has to do with priests. You see, being directly in God's presence is really dangerous. So he appoints priests as special representatives who can go into his presence on behalf of others.
So in this section, we have a story about how the priests are ordained into the priesthood. And then this other section explains the set of higher standards that the priests have to live by because they work so closely to God's presence.
The third solution in the book is all about purity laws. And this is by far the hardest thing to understand. For example, in this section, we're really concerned with knowing whether you're clean or unclean.
Or another way of saying that is being pure and impure. And here's what we need to know to understand this. When you're in a pure state, you can be near God's presence. When you're in an impure state, you can't. And so it was really important for Israelites to know what state they're in at any given moment.
So the first thing we have is a list of pure and impure animals.
Yeah, this list of animals is divided up by where they live. So on the land, in the sea, in the air. And the text is just not clear about why certain animals are impure or why touching or eating them makes you impure. What is clear, however, is that avoiding these creatures will set Israel apart, and it will remind them that God's own holiness should affect every part of their lives, including what they eat.
After the food laws, we get a lot of random rules about things like skin disease, touching dead bodies, what to do with bodily fluids.
But they're not random. All of these are things that the Israelites associated with life and death, which are sacred things because God is the author of life.
Okay, but simply coming into contact with these things makes you impure?
They do, but we have to keep in mind that it's not wrong or sinful to be ritually impure. You just wait a few days, take a bath, offer sacrifice, and you're pure again. What is inappropriate is entering into God's presence when you're in an impure state.
Now, there's more purity laws over here in this section.
Yeah, these focus on Israel's moral behavior. So these are laws about social justice, healthy relationships, having sexual integrity. Living by these laws will make Israel into a morally pure people who can live near God's presence.
Those are the 3 solutions. Now, you've probably noticed that they surround the very center of this book. And it's here that we find a really important ritual called the Day of Atonement.
Yeah, so Israel's a big tribe now, and odds are there's a lot of sin happening that goes unnoticed, that people are not dealing with. And so one time a year, the priests would take 2 goats, and one of those goats is killed, and its blood is carried right into God's presence where it symbolically covers or atones for Israel's sin.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Well, the meaning of the sacrifice, it's explained in the next chapter, where God says that the blood of a creature is its life. And so this goat's life is offered as a substitute. It's receiving God's punishment for Israel's sin so that the people don't have to.
That leaves the second goat.
Yeah, the priest puts his hands on it, and then he confesses all the sins of Israel. It's like he's placing the sins on the goat. And then that goat gets cast out forever into the wilderness. It's called the scapegoat.
Yeah, I've heard that word before.
Yeah, it's this very powerful image of how God is graciously removing Israel's sin.
But let's be honest, sacrifices in general seem so barbaric.
We have to remember that in the ancient world, sacrifices were the main way of buying favor from the gods. But the problem was that those same gods, they're unpredictable, they're fickle, you never know if they're going to ignore you or they're going to turn on you. And so it's in this cultural setting that we see Israel's God as totally different. He does get angry about human corruption, but it is never arbitrary. And he loves people. So he provides this clear way for Israel to know with confidence that they are forgiven and that despite their corruption, they are safe to live near his presence. And so that makes the book of Leviticus actually a revolutionary statement in its day.
So that's Leviticus. But Israel's still at Mount Sinai in the middle of the wilderness. They need a place to live.
Yes, the land God promised to Abraham. And so the journey to that land is what the next book of the Bible is all about.
好啦，大家咧睇一次咧，可能未必會完全明晒嘅，咁大家咧可以翻屋企再有機會去揾一揾啦呢個。咁其實喺
The
YouTube
book of Leviticus, we know you've been avoiding.
去YouTube 就會揾到噶啦。OK， 咁你少少嘅嘗試去 recap 啦，幫大家去明白啦嚇。咁其實咧喺利未記裏面咧有一個咁嘅分嗰個嘅格式啦，其實係啊。咁有儀式、有祭司同埋潔淨三個嘅大題目嚇。咁特別咧就係一個ABC、CBA 咁樣嘅structure 啦嚇。咁其實咧最重要咧，其實 end up 咧有咁嘅 structure 嘅時候，就係最中間嗰樣嘢嚇。咁但係喺利未記個 setting 嘅裏面咧，頭尾咧有講獻祭同埋嗰個節期。咁嗰啲嘅獻祭同嗰啲節期咧，其實係讓以色列人咧知道佢哋去到一個唔乾淨或者唔純潔嘅狀態嘅時候，佢哋點樣能夠去翻一個乾淨同埋純潔嗰個狀態 ，clean、unclean、pure 同 impure 嗰個嘅 status 咧，其實係佢哋可以 manage 㗎。咁而實在咧，其實係一個喺生活嘅裏面必定有一啲嘅事情係會好容易令你去咗一個唔乾淨或者唔純潔嗰個嘅 status， 但係上帝喺呢度咧就係設立咗一啲嘅儀式、一啲嘅節期，讓人去記得佢可以親近翻上帝，又或者佢哋記得上帝係佢哋生命嘅主，佢哋嘅民族嘅主。咁而喺呢個過程嘅裏面，利未記咧亦都去講咗好長係關於祭司嘅事情。特別咧喺畫面嗰度講咗啦，其實喺整個嘅民族嘅裏面，其實有一班嘅祭司，佢哋係負責幫人去親近上帝，或者係去做嗰啲嘅潔淨嘅禮儀。咁而咧就係講到祭司咧，其實係上帝所揀選嘅，就係利未嗰個支派嘅人，上帝就揀選咗佢哋成為祭司。而特別是你成為祭司嘅時候，其實你有另一個嘅準則㗎。因為你要去作為嗰個嘅當時嘅中保嘅時候，你一定要最做好你自己，以致你能夠去服侍嗰啲有需要去行禮儀嘅人。咁而咧第三樣就係嗰個嘅 purity。咁其實咧講到其實喺生活嘅裏面係有一啲嘅事情即係嗰啲生死嘅問題啦，其實係咁嗰個咧其實係因為上帝好尊重生命，所以有好多嘅事情 elements 係關於生死嘅時候，其實你就要去有嗰個潔淨嘅禮儀，又或者其實喺後面講到佢講到嗰個嘅 daily life 一啲嘅選擇social justice 嘅問題，一啲 moral 嘅問題，又或者你 sexual life 嗰個嘅問題，其實一啲內心深處一啲黑白嘅選擇，係一正邪嘅選擇嘅時候，上帝就話：萬一你選擇錯咗，其實你都可以有機會去回轉。而最重要喺利未記嘅裏面，嗰個設立就係中間嗰個嘅贖罪日。贖罪日就係講到其實喺以色列人嘅係一年做一次嘅。 係甚至係提到萬一你唔知道你得罪咗上帝，其實你去參與呢個儀式嘅時候，你嘅罪都會得到赦免。贖罪日就係喺呢個嘅咁嘅 setting， 又或者其實喺利未記成個嘅 setting 就係話，上帝揀選咗以色列人，佢哋離開咗埃及去進入迦南之前，上帝就係話：你哋跟隨我，我係一個神聖嘅神 ，I am a holy God。而你哋一定要好好嘅去做好自己，以致你能夠好似我一樣。而上帝亦都知道喺你哋人生嘅裏面，必定有一啲嘅問題去出現，佢哋嘅群體又好，佢哋個人又好，一定唔係永永遠遠去係成為聖潔。所以上帝就話：你哋用呢啲嘅方法，甚至贖罪日，去讓你哋每個禮拜又好，一年一次又好，你能夠去 redeem， 能夠 atone， 去改翻你嗰個 status， 以致你喺我面前能夠被稱為聖潔，以致你能夠去親近我。你同我有時唔明白利未記，因為可能好遙遠，又或者好多嘅事情我哋今日咧唔需要再去 follow。但係其實喺利未記裏面嘅設立，特別嗰個贖罪日，其實係極之重要。喺我哋嘅信仰裏面，喺耶穌嗰個嘅買贖嘅裏面，點解耶穌可以贖你同我嘅罪？係因為喺舊約嘅裏面，上帝一早已經設立咗一個無罪嘅羊羔，去為你同我嘅罪而死嘅時候，我哋可以被買贖，我哋可以被寬恕，我哋嘅罪可以一筆勾銷。其實係因為呢個贖罪日嘅設立，所以耶穌嘅受死可以贖我哋嘅罪。如果舊約冇呢個嘅 setting， 或者舊約原來冇呢啲嘅 boundary 嘅話，冇話過原來人會變成潔淨同不潔淨 pure 同 unpure 嘅時候，冇呢啲嘅分界嘅話，其實耶穌嘅贖罪係唔需要，又或者唔 valid， 又或者其實冇方法，冇設立到呢個方法去救贖我哋嘅話，耶穌嚟到先由頭再去 set up， 係唔係上帝嘅心意。而另外我哋亦都要從新約嘅角度去睇翻嘅時候，我哋成日都話信徒皆祭司 ，OK？ Priesthood of all believers，OK？ 頭先講咗 belief 同 believers， 其實我哋最重要，我哋成為 believers 嘅時候，我哋最重要嗰個身份唔係 belief 咁簡單。而我哋係今日喺呢個時代嘅祭司，所以我哋都知道，我哋要記得上帝同人係有一個 boundary， 而我哋今日就係嗰個耶穌差派我哋喺呢個時代，我哋嘅朋友、我哋嘅家人當中嗰個小小嘅 mediator， 嗰個小小嘅中保、小小嘅祭司，以致人係能夠知道 realize。我哋去親近上帝嘅時候，唔可以掉以輕心。我哋一定要尊重翻嗰個 boundary， 我哋一定要好好嘅去做好我哋自己，去學習親近上帝，一步一步嘅行。聖經裏面咧有好多嘅界線，好多時候咧我哋都未必中意，又或者我哋唔明白。又或者當我哋睇《使徒行傳》嘅時候，嗰張嘢飄落嚟，上高有所有唔同嘅動物，我哋全部都食得嘅時候，我哋覺得好開心，我哋抹晒嗰條線啊！我哋以為咧乜都冇所謂，其實唔係嘅。聖經嘅教導唔係乜都冇所謂，喺飲食上可能係，但係喺神人嗰個界線，我哋依然需要尊重。而我哋都要記得嗰啲嘅 boundary， 俾我哋係一個嘅提醒。而呢個嘅提醒 其實係一個祝福，以致我哋唔會逾越呢個界線，以致我哋唔會好輕佻嘅去親近上帝。雖然有時有啲嘅界線我哋未必中意，我哋亦都未必明白。利未記嘅界線我哋今日睇返，可能我哋都唔明白。但係我哋就要知道，原來上帝嘅心意去設立呢啲嘅一條一條嘅界嘅時候，係要話俾你同我知道，呢個係保護我哋嘅祝福，呢個係幫助我哋人生去過得聖潔一啲，能夠親近佢多一啲。今日仍然有好多唔同嘅界線，okay？ 一夫一妻，一生一世，一男一女，我哋都知道呢個係一啲嘅界線去保護我哋。我哋要從心底嘅裏面去學習跟隨上帝。我哋唔只係表面嘅去扮一個嘅基督徒，呢個係一個嘅界線。我哋要去服侍身邊有需要嘅人，因為呢個係上帝嘅心意，以致我哋能透過服侍，我哋就能夠成為今日嘅祭司，讓人領人去親近上帝多一啲。弟兄姊妹，希望你同我記得每一個嘅 boundary 其實係保護我哋，係祝福我哋。唔明白嘅時候，去繼續嘅去思想，去尋問，上帝點解你要喺我人生嘅裏面去有呢一條嘅界？到底你想保護我啲乜嘢？你想祝福我啲乜嘢？當你同我明白嘅時候，我哋就可以好盡心盡力嘅去服侍上帝，去成為你同我身邊嘅人嘅祭司。願上帝都繼續使用你同我，真係喺呢個時代嘅裏面，其實好多嘅艱難，好多嘅挑戰，又或者好多人都唔明白上帝嘅心意，但係你同我就係今日嘅祭司，係差咗你同我出去喺嗰條 borderline，okay？ 上帝同人之間嗰條 borderline 就係你同我服侍嗰個嘅位置。我哋一齊祈禱。主耶穌，求你去幫助我哋，因為好多時候我哋唔明白點解有啲嘢係真係 no， 甚至有啲嘢你唔講已經剎停咗，我哋唔能夠再向前行。但係我哋相信，當你每一次 say no 嘅時候，其實係保護我哋，係一個嘅化咗妝嘅祝福。求你都教導我哋每一個，教導我哋去嘗試明白你背後嘅心意，以致我哋能夠更全心嘅接受。主，求你幫助我哋喺呢個時代嘅裏面，原來我哋都成為別人嘅祭司，係真係讓人能夠去親近你。嗰個嘅中介，嗰個嘅接洽人，其實唔容易做，因為我哋要明白你嘅神聖其實真係不可侵犯，我哋唔可以輕佻嘅去親近你，但係同時我哋亦都明白喺好多嘅人生嘅裏面，有好多嘅艱難，好多嘅挑戰，甚至人生好多時候都會有一啲黑暗嘅選擇。幫助我哋能夠幫人去處理呢一啲嘅問題，以致人能夠去親近你。教導我哋每一個就活喺嗰個 boundary 嘅時候，喺嗰條 borderline 嘅時候，我哋能夠去明白你更加嘅多，亦都明白我哋身邊嘅人更加嘅多，因為呢個係我哋可以去服侍，可以去祝福人嘅機會。唔單止我哋要去掌握你俾我哋嗰份化妝嘅祝福，我哋掌握之後，我哋能夠去祝福身邊嘅人，加力俾我哋每一個，因為唔容易明白，唔容易接受，但係求你讓我哋能夠更加嘅親近你，以致我哋就曉得明白你更加嘅多。祝福我哋，使我哋每一個 願你嘅靈與我哋同去，讓我哋喺呢個時代嘅裏面就成為你嘅祭司，成為你用嘅一個一個嘅小嘅祭司，去祝福身邊嘅人，幫人處理罪嘅問題、不潔嘅問題。願主耶穌基督嘅恩惠、父神嘅慈愛、聖靈嘅感動，常與你們眾人同在，從今時直到永永遠遠。阿門。我哋一齊唱，是為你預備。